Okay, so get this, listeners. You guys sent in a whole bunch of stuff about idioms. And we're going to take a deep dive into them today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole idiom script and ton of notes. And wow, there are a lot of idioms out there.
There are, yeah.
Over 40. I mean, it's really amazing how much we use these like colorful sayings all the time. And we don't even really think about it. It's like sprinkled into our everyday conversation.
Well, and it's interesting how idioms offer a window into like a culture's history.
Yeah.
And its values and even its sense of humor.
Right.
Like there are these little linguistic fossils that reveal how people have thought and communicated in the past.
It's true. I've always wondered about that, like where did bite the bullet come from? Or let the cat out of the bag? I need like the backstory on these things.
Yeah. Well, let's start with one that we use pretty often, break the ice.
Okay.
Have you ever been in a situation where you just felt awkward and you just didn't know how to start a conversation?
Oh,
like maybe at a party or a work event?
Yes, like a networking thing. I get that deer in the headlights look for sure.
Exactly. So breaking the ice means taking that first step to ease the tension, to make everyone feel a bit more comfortable.
Okay.
And the script has a good example. Someone telling a joke at a meeting to break the ice. And it's really about creating more relaxed and open atmosphere.
Yeah, so it's like, that initial awkwardness, it's like a frozen lake or something, and someone needs to just like crack it open.
Oh, yeah.
For the conversation to flow.
That's a great analogy. And it really kind of highlights the metaphorical nature of idioms.
Yeah.
How they kind of use these concrete images to express these abstract ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of facing things head on, bite the bullet. Ooh, that's another one that makes me just cringe a little bit.
Well, the origin of that idiom is definitely cringeworthy.
Yeah.
It comes from the days before anesthesia, when soldiers would literally bite down on a bullet to deal with the pain during surgery.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That puts things in perspective. But it also makes you wonder about how language evolves,
Yeah.
We use these kind of like almost euphemistic expressions to sort of like soften the blow of, what are really harsh realities.
Absolutely. Idioms can definitely reveal a lot about how a culture kind of deals with those difficult topics or unpleasant topics.
Okay, well, I need a more uplifting idiom after that one.
Sure.
How about a blessing in disguise?
Ah, that's a good one. It reminds us that even like negative experiences can have these positive outcomes.
Yeah.
Sometimes what seems like a setback can lead us to a better path.
Right. I like how in the script it talks about you're lost in a city.
Yeah.
And you stumble upon this hidden cafe.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing in disguise. So it's like that, sometimes a wrong turn leads to something unexpected and wonderful.
It really is about perspective, isn't it? Reframing our understanding of events. And speaking of understanding, hit the nail on the head is a really good idiom for those moments of clarity. When we grasp a concept perfectly.
Yes, it's like when you're struggling with a problem and someone offers a solution and it just clicks.
Right.
Like, oh, that's it. It's so satisfying.
Yeah.
And the script mentions, let me see, you really hit the nail on the head when you said the project needs more time.
Right.
It's about accurately assessing a situation, right?
Yeah, it is. And it makes you wonder if there's like a connection between that feeling of hitting the nail on the head and problem-solving skills. Are people who are good at using that idiom also good at critical thinking? I don't know. It's interesting.
It's an interesting thought. It makes me think of all the different ways we can use language to, to express not just what we know, but how we think.
Right. Exactly. And sometimes we use idioms to express those moments when we're not feeling our best, like when we're under the weather.
Oh, under the weather.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you think there are cultural differences in how people describe feeling a little bit ill, under the weather?
Yeah.
Like just slightly ill.
Definitely. Under the weather is an interesting one because it almost kind of personifies the weather.
Right.
Yeah. Like it's this force that can impact our well-being. And in other cultures, they might attribute it to different things like spirits or imbalances in the body or, yeah.
That's fascinating. So it's like, our idioms reflect not only our language, but also our beliefs about the world around us.
Precisely. And sometimes when we're feeling under the weather, we might let the cat out of the bag.
Oh, yeah.
Reveal a secret without meaning to.
Oh, man. I am so bad at that. I spill the beans all the time, accidentally. Have you ever done that?
We all have, haven't we?
Yeah. It's like, ooh.
It's that feeling of, whoops, I shouldn't have said that.
Right.
And the script talks about someone spoiling a surprise party. So it's really about unintended disclosure.
But, but sometimes letting the cat out of the bag could actually be a good thing, right? Like maybe it forces people to be honest about something that they were kind of hiding before.
That is a very interesting point. It does make you think about the ethics of secrets.
Right.
When is it appropriate to reveal them, even accidentally?
It's true. It's like those moments in movies where the character blurts out a truth that changes everything. And so those unintended reveals can actually be catalysts for change, for growth or change.
Oh, that's right. Speaking of change, what about the ball is in your court?
Oh, yeah. Good one.
Do you think this idiom always implies a positive opportunity, or can it also feel like a burden?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the situation and the person. Some people love that feeling of, oh, okay, it's up to me. They're like, I got this. And they thrive under that pressure. But other people, maybe they get, a little bit overwhelmed. They don't like being the decision maker.
Yeah, the script uses the example of, making an offer, like in a business negotiation.
Right.
But I think it applies to personal relationships, too.
Oh,
those moments where you've kind of, put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And you said what you need, and then you're kind of waiting for the other person to respond.
Yeah, it can be a very tense waiting game.
It can. And sometimes, while we're waiting for the ball to come back into our court, we might find ourselves burning the midnight oil to get things done.
Oh, yes, burning the midnight oil. The classic idiom for working late into the night. It's interesting, isn't it, how this expression, originally I think it was, actually burning oil in lamps for light, and it encompasses any kind of, late night effort.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how technology has changed our relationship with work and with time in general, we're no longer limited by daylight hours.
Yep.
And so the lines between work and leisure have become so blurred.
Absolutely. And speaking of blurring lines, how about when something costs an arm and a leg? That line between a reasonable price and something that's just outrageous is pretty subjective, isn't it?
It's so subjective. Yeah, what might be a splurge for one person might be another person's, everyday expense. It all depends on your financial situation, your priorities.
Right.
And the script mentions a new phone that costs an arm and a leg.
Right.
But honestly, with the rate of technological advancement these days, new gadgets, they're almost designed to become obsolete so quickly.
Yeah.
To drive that cycle of constant upgrading and yeah.
It's a very interesting example of how consumer culture kind of plays into our language.
Yeah.
And our perception of value.
Right.
What might have been considered a total luxury item, just a few years ago.
Yeah.
It can quickly become something that we think we need.
Necessity, right.
Yeah. We need this new phone.
It's like that saying, keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with messages about what we need to have in order to be happy or successful.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, what is something that you consider a dime a dozen?
Yeah.
It's something that's so common, it's almost lost its value.
Honestly, in the age of social media, it feels like everyone's an influencer now. And, it's it's diluted the meaning of expertise and authenticity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a great point. And the script says that good ideas are a dime a dozen. But I think that's even more true today. when information is so readily available, right?
Yeah.
The real challenge is filtering through all that
Yeah.
and finding those truly original and valuable ideas.
It's like the signal to noise ratio has become so skewed.
Right.
You know, we're drowning in information, but we're starving for wisdom.
Yeah. And sometimes in all that noise, we accidentally spill the beans, reveal something we didn't intend to share.
I've always, speaking of spilling the beans, have you ever noticed how some people seem to do it almost compulsively?
Yeah.
It's like they can't resist gossiping or, sharing confidential information.
It makes you wonder about, the psychology behind that behavior. Is it a need for attention? Is it a lack of impulse control? Or maybe a misguided attempt to create bonds?
Right.
By sharing secrets. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's like a human version of letting the cat out of the bag, but maybe with a more complex set of intentions,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And sometimes those spilled beans can actually reveal something much larger, just the tip of the iceberg.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's like you see this giant iceberg floating in the ocean. And, there's so much more hidden beneath the surface. It's just this powerful reminder that things are often much more complex than they appear.
Absolutely.
And the script uses the example of a missing file. That's just the tip of the iceberg in a much larger organizational problem.
Right.
It makes you think about how we often focus on these surface-level issues without really addressing the underlying causes.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we finally realize the true extent of the problem, we might be tempted to just throw in the towel.
Oh, throw in the towel. Yeah. Have you ever felt that way about a project or a goal? Like you just wanted to give up?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Totally.
I think everyone has that feeling at some point.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about the idiom throw in the towel is that it comes from boxing.
That's right.
So it's like, you're acknowledging defeat, but in a way that also kind of implies respect for the opponent.
Right.
It's recognizing that you've been outmatched.
That's a good point. So it raises the question of whether there's honor in knowing when to quit. Like, is it always about perseverance? Or is there value in recognizing when a fight's no longer worth fighting?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes, walking away is actually the smartest move, the bravest move.
It is. It is. And sometimes what prevents us from throwing in the towel is that fear of getting cold feet. That pre-event anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
That makes us question our decisions.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. I get cold feet all the time,
Yeah.
before presentations or, performances, even social gatherings sometimes. I'm like, oh, do I really want to do this?
It's a very natural reaction.
Yeah.
To new or challenging situations. But I think it's also linked to, fear of failure.
Right.
Of making the wrong choice. And the script uses the classic example of getting cold feet before a wedding.
Of course.
It's a decision with potentially huge consequences.
Right.
So it's understandable why someone might hesitate.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's a correlation between, like, the severity of the potential consequences and, like, the intensity of the cold feet,
That's a very fascinating hypothesis. And speaking of things that are really hard to express verbally, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing how a single image can just evoke all these emotions and communicate information in a way that language sometimes can't quite capture.
And the script suggests, showing a photograph.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to describe a beautiful view. And it's about recognizing the limitations of language.
Yeah.
And embracing the power of visual communication.
Right, right. And speaking of communication, sometimes a little bit of playful teasing can go a long way in, building rapport, pulling someone's leg. I've actually been doing that to you this whole time.
I had a feeling.
But that's the beauty of the idiom.
Right. Yeah.
It's all in good fun. It's not meant to be taken seriously. And it kind of relies on this shared understanding of, the rules of playfulness.
Absolutely.
The example in the script is someone telling an untrue story as a joke. So it's about using humor to, create that connection, lighten the mood.
That's right.
Oh.
But of course, as we all know, sometimes actions speak louder than words.
Yes. Have you ever had someone's words not really match their actions?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. All the time. It's so frustrating when people say one thing and do another, and it makes you really question their sincerity, their integrity.
Absolutely. And this idiom is really about recognizing that discrepancy between words and deeds. And the script gives the example of someone promising to help, but not following through. So it's a reminder to pay attention to what people do, not just what they say.
It's like, that saying, talk is cheap.
Yeah.
It's easy to make promises, but it takes effort.
Right.
And commitment to follow through.
Absolutely. And when we're dealing with those situations where, actions have let us down, it's important to remember, don't cry over spilled milk.
Oh, you know what? Speaking of that, I had a major coffee mishap this morning.
Oh, no.
Knocked my whole cup over my keyboard.
Oh.
But you know what? I tried to channel my inner don't cry over spilled milk.
Yeah.
Cleaned it up and moved on with my day.
That's the spirit. It's about, accepting what's happened, focusing on what we can control and moving forward. And the script uses the example of, missing a train.
Yeah.
But it applies to so many situations in life.
Yeah, so it's about, resilience, adapting to the unexpected and not letting setbacks completely derail us.
That's right. And speaking of feeling derailed, what about those moments when we're feeling incredibly happy? Like on cloud nine.
Oh, on cloud nine.
What's a moment in your life that made you feel that euphoric?
Ooh. I'd say holding my book for the first time.
Oh.
After it was published. All those years of work culminated in that moment. And it was just, it was pure joy. Just this sense of accomplishment,
That's beautiful. And the script mentions, getting a job offer as a reason to be on cloud nine.
Oh, yeah.
So it's that feeling of pure bliss, like you're just floating above the world.
Yeah. Makes you wonder if there's a physiological component to that, Like a surge of endorphins or something.
Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, yeah.
But speaking of, contrasting emotions, what about when someone gives you the cold shoulder?
Ooh, yes.
Have you ever been on the receiving end of that?
Ugh, yeah. It's the worst, especially when you don't know why they're ignoring you. It's like they built this invisible wall, and you're just left there like, what did I do?
Right, and the script mentions someone giving the cold shoulder after an argument. So it's this deliberate act of creating distance, of withholding warmth and connection.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if it's like a passive-aggressive way of expressing anger or hurt. Instead of communicating directly, they're using silence as a weapon.
That's a good point. It really brings up the whole issue of communication styles.
Right.
And how those can impact relationships.
Right. And sometimes a little direct communication, even if it's uncomfortable, is much better than, the silent treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things that are rare and valuable, how about those events that happen once in a blue moon?
Oh, yeah. Once in a blue moon, good one.
What do you do once in a blue moon?
Once in a blue moon, I would say I go all out on a fancy dinner.
Ah, nice.
I love trying new restaurants. But, it's definitely a special occasion kind of thing.
Yeah, it's those rare treats that we savor, right?
Absolutely.
And this idiom is linked to the actual astronomical phenomenon of a double full moon in a single month.
Right.
Which happens very infrequently.
Right. And the script mentions, seeing your cousins who live far away.
Yeah.
That only happens once in a blue moon, So it's like those moments of connection become even more precious because of their rarity.
Right, exactly. And sometimes life throws us curveballs that land us in hot water.
Ah, yes.
Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were in trouble? Maybe facing some consequences for a mistake?
Oh, for sure. Early in my career, I made a big error on a project.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, it was bad. And I ended up having to, explain it to my boss. Talk about feeling the heat.
Yeah, we've all been there. It's that sinking feeling of knowing you've messed up and that, there will be repercussions.
Right. And the script mentions missing deadlines as a reason to be in hot water.
Right.
It's a good reminder that even small slip-ups can have big consequences, especially in like a professional setting.
Right. And sometimes when we're in those high-pressure situations, all we can do is keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you right now. I hope things are going well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But sometimes, instead of just relying on luck, we need to cut to the chase and take decisive action.
Right. So it's about being efficient, getting to the heart of the matter. And the script mentions cutting to the chase when time is limited. But I think it also applies to any situation where there's like a lot of fluff,
Right.
or distraction that's kind of obscuring the main point.
It's about prioritizing clarity and action.
Right.
And speaking of prioritizing, I think it's time for us to hit the sack.
Hit the sack.
All this idiom talk has worn me out.
Me too. My brain is full of colorful sayings. But before we go, we need to address the elephant in the room. Those big, obvious issues that everyone just avoids discussing.
Ah, yes. That feeling of unspoken tension. Like there's this giant elephant just standing in the middle of the room, but everyone's pretending it's not there.
It's so true. And the script mentions, budget cuts being the elephant in the room during a discussion about a new project. And it's amazing how people will just dance around these sensitive topics.
Yeah.
Even when it's clear that everyone's thinking about the same thing.
It makes you wonder about, the social dynamics at play.
Yeah.
The fear of confrontation. Or maybe, a sense of helplessness in the face of, a difficult situation.
Yeah. It's like everyone's playing this game of pretend. Like if they just ignore the elephant long enough, it'll magically disappear.
Yeah. But as we all know, ignoring problems rarely makes them go away.
Right.
Sometimes they just get bigger, more difficult to deal with.
Right. And sometimes when we try to tackle those big problems, we end up putting all our eggs in one basket, risking everything on a single solution.
That's a really good idiom for, highlighting the importance of diversification, of not pinning all our hopes on just one outcome. And the script uses the example of, applying to only one university. So it's about spreading our risk, exploring multiple options.
Yeah. It makes you think about, those people who seem to just go all in on everything they do, whether it's a career, a relationship, an investment. It can be admirable, but it carries a lot of risk, doesn't it?
Right. It's like that saying, don't bet the farm.
Right.
There's a balance between taking calculated risks and just being reckless.
Yeah. And sometimes when people behave recklessly or unfairly, they end up getting a taste of their own medicine.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that happen?
Oh, absolutely.
It's so satisfying.
It's a classic example of karma, of experiencing the same, negative treatment that you've inflicted on others. And the script mentions someone who ignores their teammates' ideas and then has their own ideas ignored in return.
Right.
Classic.
It's like the universe is trying to teach them a lesson about empathy and reciprocity. Like, how do you like it?
Exactly. And hopefully they learn from that experience. But sometimes when people don't learn from their mistakes, they end up burning bridges,
Yeah, burning bridges, that's a powerful one.
Yeah. It suggests a complete and irreversible severing of ties. And the script uses the example of, quitting a job without notice.
Right.
So it's a reminder that our actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences can be lasting.
Yeah. It makes you think about the importance of reputation, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
Burning bridges can really limit your opportunities in the future.
It can.
It's like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Right.
Building and maintaining positive relationships is, it's essential for success in any field, really.
That's right. And speaking of navigating difficult situations, how about those times when we just barely escape disaster?
Yeah.
By the skin of our teeth.
By the skin of our teeth. Oh, I've definitely had my fair share of close calls. I remember once I almost missed a connecting flight because of a delay. And I literally sprinted through the airport, like heart pounding.
Oh.
And I got to the gate just as the doors were closing. It was like, such a stressful experience.
Wow. And the script talks about passing an exam by the skin of your teeth.
Right.
So it's those moments when we just barely make it.
Yeah, yeah.
Success is just a matter of, luck or timing.
It's a good reminder that sometimes, even when we don't feel prepared or even deserving, we still somehow manage to pull through.
We do. And sometimes the best way to avoid those kinds of stressful situations is to let sleeping dogs lie.
Ah, yes. The wisdom of avoiding unnecessary conflict. I'm definitely a peacemaker at heart, so I would much rather let sleeping dogs lie than risk, stirring up trouble.
Right? It's about knowing when to pick your battles.
Right.
When to let things go.
Absolutely.
And the script mentions avoiding a past argument.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that rehashing old grievances often just reopens wounds. And it creates more conflict.
It's like that saying, don't poke the bear, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's better to leave well enough alone.
Absolutely. And speaking of leaving things alone, sometimes when someone's lost in thought, we might ask them, a penny for your thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
It's a gentle way of inviting them to share what's on their mind.
I love that expression. It's so lovely, isn't it? It really shows that you're interested in their, in their inner world and their perspective.
Yeah, it's about creating space for open communication. Sharing those unspoken thoughts and feelings.
You've been so on the ball with all these idiom explanations. I'm really impressed.
Oh, well, thank you. I try to stay focused and attentive.
Yeah.
And, this idiom really highlights those qualities of being alert, efficient, and responsive. And the script actually mentions someone finishing work ahead of schedule.
Right.
As an example of being on the ball.
It's a really valuable trait in any field, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Like the ability to anticipate needs.
Yeah.
To stay organized and deliver results consistently.
Right. And sometimes when we're not on the ball, we miss the writing on the wall. Those warning signs that something bad's about to happen?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever experienced that? Seeing the signs, but not really heeding them.
Oh, definitely. I think we all have those moments where we kind of choose to ignore the red flags, hoping that, maybe things will work out somehow. It's like we're trying to convince ourselves that if we don't acknowledge the problem, it'll just magically go away.
Right. And the script uses the example of a company's financial problems being the writing on the wall that they were going to go bankrupt.
Right.
And it's a good reminder that ignoring reality rarely leads to positive outcomes.
Right.
Sometimes, facing those difficult truths head on is the best way to navigate challenging situations.
Yeah, it's like ripping off the Band-Aid. It might be painful in the moment.
Yeah.
But it allows for the healing process to begin.
Exactly. And sometimes when we refuse to face reality, we end up chasing rainbows.
Ah, chasing rainbows.
Yeah, pursuing these unattainable dreams that kind of lead us nowhere.
Yeah, I think we all have those moments of, wanting something that's just out of reach, whether it's a career goal, a relationship, a material possession, It can be really hard to let go of those sometimes.
Yeah, and the script mentions, trying to get a promotion without having the right qualifications as an example of chasing rainbows.
Right.
So it's about recognizing the difference between ambition and illusion, between setting realistic goals and setting yourself up for disappointment.
It's like that saying, reach for the stars, but keep your feet on the ground,
Yeah.
There's a balance between dreaming big, but also being grounded in reality.
Absolutely. And speaking of staying grounded, sometimes people just beat around the bush instead of getting straight to the point.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a conversation with someone who just couldn't say what they meant directly?
Oh, all the time. Like,
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. Why can't they just say what they mean?
Right. It's like, they're afraid of being too direct, maybe too confrontational.
Right.
But often, that indirectness just leads to more confusion and misunderstanding.
Totally. It's like they're trying to navigate a maze blindfolded.
Yeah.
Like just bumping into walls instead of taking the clear path.
Exactly. And sometimes the opposite approach is needed, you know? We need to just throw caution to the wind and just go for it.
Ooh, I like that one. Throw caution to the wind.
Yeah. Have you ever taken like a really big risk that paid off?
Oh, yeah. Quitting my stable but super unfulfilling job to pursue writing full time, that was a huge leap of faith.
Wow.
It was scary, but it's been the most rewarding decision I've ever made, for sure.
That's fantastic. And, you know, the script mentions quitting a job to travel.
Right.
As an example of throwing caution to the wind.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about, you know, embracing the unknown.
Yeah.
Stepping outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And just trusting that things will work out.
It's that feeling of jumping off a cliff, you know? And you're like, okay, I'm either going to learn to fly or I'm going to crash and burn.
Right.
But either way, it's an adventure.
It is an adventure. And often those adventures require us to, you know, embrace the motto, no pain, no gain.
Oh, yeah. No pain, no gain. Classic idiom that emphasizes the importance of hard work and sacrifice to achieve your goals, you know? And it's often used in the context of like fitness, but
Right.
it really applies to so many areas of life, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And the script talks about training for a marathon as an example.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder that, you know, growth and success often come with these challenges and setbacks along the way.
It's like that saying, nothing worth having comes easy. We have to be willing to put in the effort to push through those difficult moments in order to, to reach our full potential.
Right. Okay, so in a nutshell, what have we learned about idioms today?
Oh, good one. Well, in a nutshell, we've learned that idioms are more than just these quirky sayings, you know? They're like these little linguistic treasures that give us this glimpse into, you know, the history and culture and even the psychology of a language.
That's right. It's really fascinating how these expressions, which often originated from these concrete images or actions, have evolved to convey these really abstract ideas and emotions.
Totally. And it's like they take on a life of their own, you know? They transcend their literal meanings and they become these powerful metaphors that shape how we think and how we communicate.
And sometimes when we get too caught up in those metaphors, we end up making a mountain out of a molehill.
Ah, yes. Guilty as charged on that one.
You know, exaggerating small problems into these huge crises.
Oh, my brain has a built-in magnifying glass for worries.
And the script gives a simple example of, you know, someone overreacting to this small mistake.
Yeah.
So it's a reminder to keep things in perspective.
Right.
And not let our anxieties blow things out of proportion.
Yeah, it's like that saying, don't sweat the small stuff.
Right. It's important to kind of prioritize our concerns and focus our energy on what really matters.
Right.
And speaking of prioritizing, I think it's time for us to hit the road.
Oh, hit the road. Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's always more to explore.
That's true. It's funny, hit the road is such a great idiom for, you know, for leaving, for starting a new journey. It implies a sense of like purpose and excitement, you know? And the script talks about hitting the road to go to the beach. But I think it really applies to any kind of adventure.
Yeah,
Whether it's physical or intellectual or even emotional, you know?
that's right. It's about embracing the unknown, seeking out new experiences, and expanding our horizons.
Love it.
And sometimes on those journeys, we need to remember that a watched pot never boils.
Ooh, yes. The classic reminder to be patient. It's so true, isn't it? It's like you're waiting for something so eagerly,
Yeah.
and it feels like time is just moving in slow motion.
The script uses the example of waiting for an email,
Right.
but it really applies to, you know, so many situations in life, whether it's waiting for a phone call, a decision,
Yeah.
a change in circumstances, you know.
Absolutely. So it's a reminder that sometimes the best thing we can do is just relax.
Yeah.
Trust the process.
Yeah.
And let things unfold in their own time.
Exactly. And sometimes when the time is right, we need to be ready to act at the drop of a hat.
Oh, that's one of my favorite idioms. It conjures up this image of like spontaneity, of being ready to seize the moment.
Right. And the script gives a great example of, leaving a job for a better opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about being adaptable open to these new possibilities and willing to make, these bold moves when the time is right.
It's like that saying, carpe diem, seize the day.
Exactly. Yeah. But wait a second. Didn't we see "Don't cry over spilled milk" like twice in that script? And the ball's in your court? Is that a mistake?
You know what? You're right. It seems even experts can make mistakes. But what's so fascinating here is that the repeated idiom, "don't cry over spilled milk," is all about accepting mistakes and moving on. It's like a perfect illustration of, how we can learn from our slip-ups.
That's right. It's a good reminder that nobody's perfect and that making mistakes is just a natural part of the learning process. And what really matters is how we respond to them, Do we dwell on them or do we use them as opportunities to, to grow and improve?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of the ball is in your court, what are you going to do with all of this idiom knowledge?
That is a great question, and it leads perfectly into our final thought for you today.
It's amazing to think about, just how many idioms we've covered today. And it's really just scratching the surface.
Right. I mean, there's so many more out there. And like you were saying, the language is always evolving.
Yeah.
New idioms are being created all the time.
Yeah.
To reflect, the changing world around us.
It's like this never-ending treasure hunt for, for these little gems of language.
It is. So keep your ears open for those new expressions.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to try them out.
Right. Embrace that playful and creative side of language. After all, idioms are meant to be fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before we go, I wanted to kind of circle back to something you mentioned earlier. You were talking about how so many idioms are rooted in these like physical actions or objects,
right.
Like bite the bullet,
right?
Throw in the towel, spill the beans. They all evoke these very visceral images.
Right. Like we're drawing on those physical experiences to kind of, make sense of abstract ideas, which makes me wonder, as our world becomes increasingly digital, will we start to see new idioms that emerge to reflect that shift?
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. Language always adapts to reflect the way we live and the way we interact with the world. I mean, we already talked about, crashing a website or scrolling through a news feed.
That's true. So maybe in the future we'll be saying things like, I need to download some motivation, or, my brain is buffering right now.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I can see that happening.
Yeah.
And it'll be really fascinating to see how technology continues to shape our language.
Right.
And our thought processes,
But it makes you wonder, like, if those new idioms, if they'll lose a little bit of that, that visceral quality of the older ones,
Right.
Will they feel as rich and nuanced if they're not grounded in those physical experiences? I don't know. It's something to think about.
It is something to ponder for sure.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought. What idiom really resonated with you today? And how can you use it in your own conversations?
Let those idioms spice up your language.
Yeah.
Add a dash of wit and wisdom to your everyday interactions.
Beautifully said.
Until next time.
Happy talking.